Hello guys, in this lecture I am going to tell you about the data types in C language. So guys, in the previous lectures I have told you about the characters, and I told you that in English and in mathematics whatever we need to express we can express using the alphabets, which includes capital alphabets from A to Z, small alphabets from A to Z. We may have special characters, which includes symbols like ampersand, plus, minus, this, double quote, and so on. And we may need to have digits, right, from 0 to 9. And if we want to store this information in our computer memory, then we need to tell the compiler about the type of data that we want to store. For example, with this alphabets, special character and digits, we can create an integer number, integers like 23, 45. We can have a real number like say 23.5, 45.3 and so on, and we may have a characters, right, which are enclosed in a single quote like this capital A. I can enclose star, okay, and so on. So now if I want to store this information in our computer memory, or whenever I want to declare a variable that are going to store this type of information, then at that particular time I need to tell the compiler about the type of data that variable is going to store, so that compiler will reserve the memory accordingly. For example, if I want to store an integer value, then I need to tell the compiler like this, int num, so that if I write this int num, then compiler will come to know that I want to declare a variable with name num, and in this num I am going to store integer value. And once I declare this num as integer, thereafter I cannot store any real number or any character into it. I will be allowed to store only an integer value like 23, 45, 56 and so on. Only integer value. Similarly, if I want to store any real number, then I need to declare the compiler that declare one. I need to declare a variable, say marks, in which I will store only the real number. So by writing this float, I am telling the compiler that create one variable marks, and in marks I want to store only real number. So once the compiler create this variable marks, in this marks I will be allowed to store only real number. Apart from real number, I will not be able to store integer values. I will not be able to store character. If I try to store marks, if I try to store integer value like something like 3, then compiler will not take it just as 3. Compiler will automatically add 0.0 to it, right? So by writing this, I am just telling the compiler to create one variable with the name marks, and the data type of that is float, means this marks can have only real number. To store the real number, we have another data type which is known as double. So I can use double also. So over here P1 is going to be a variable which will hold the value of type real. Similarly, if I want to store the character, then I can declare a variable like this. Over here this char it indicates, it tells the compiler that over here create one variable name which will store only the characters. That is, I can write name equals to this. I can also write name equals to this. But if I try to write something like name equals to 32.5, then compiler will create an error. It will generate an error because I have declared name as character, means name can store only character information. So if I try to store the real number, then compiler is going to generate an error that only characters are allowed, right? So it means that whenever I declare a variable, I need to define the data type of that variable. That is, by defining the data type, I simply mean that I am defining the type of a data that that particular variable can store, right? Now coming to over here, if you look at this table, in this table it is mentioned data type, and over here this is the character, and you can see that this character, they are occupying 1 byte memory. Byte is the measurement of memory, measurement unit of memory, means 1 byte means only that we can store 8-bit information. If it is 2 byte, then it means we can store 16-bit information. So more number of bytes means more memory is required. So you can note that character, when I declare the variable as character, it is going to take only 1 byte memory. When I declare the variable as integer, it is taking 2 bytes. When I am declaring it as float, it is taking 4 bytes. When I am declaring it as double, it is taking 8 bytes, right? Depending on the compiler, that if it is 16-bit compiler, then integer will take 2 bytes. If the compiler is 32 bits, then integer will take 4 bytes. 4 bytes means it is equals to 32 bits, since 1 byte is equals to 8 bits, right? So you can see the difference and the reason that we need to declare the data type. By declaring the data type, we are telling the compiler how much memory need to be reserved. If I just want to store character, then only 1 byte memory is required. If I want to store integer, then 2 bytes are required. If I want to store real number, then 4 bytes or 8 bytes are required, and so on, right? And from here, from the range, you can see the range that in integer we can store number from minus 32,768 to 30,767. This short unsigned, over here the range is this. So what is, now the question is, what is this short, what is this signed? So these are known as the modifiers. So we have 4 modifiers known as, that are signed, unsigned, long and short. Now as you can see in this table, that over here with int, if we put a signed, it indicates that in this type of a variable we can store both positive as well as negative number, and that you can see from the range, that in this range indicates the range of numbers, the number that we can store number within this range. If we try to store 40,000, compiler is going to give an error. We are not allowed to store 40,000 using this data type. Okay, and in this data type we can store negative number, we can store positive number. Suppose if there is a case that I do not want, I know that a negative number will not be there. So in that case, what I can do, I can put unsigned over here. With int, I can use unsigned. And unsigned range, it is, you can see it is from 0 to 65,535. So if I know that negative number is not there, there is no possibility that I will get a negative number. So in that case, I can declare this so that the memory that is used to store the negative numbers, that memory can also be used to store the positive number. So you can see when I used unsigned, range has increased. Previously we are able to store only up to 32,767, but by writing this unsigned, I can increase the range to 65,535. So it depends on the application, on the requirement. If I know that negative numbers will not be there, so I can use unsigned. If negative numbers are there, then I will use signed only. So with this modifier, signed and unsigned, I am able to tell the compiler about the range. Second type of modifiers, they are the long and short. Now if you look at in this table, we have this long signed and short signed, right? And we can also see the range. In short signed, range is this, in long signed, range is this, and the byte over here it is 2 bytes, over here it is 4 bytes. So you can see by writing this long signed, we are able to increase the byte. So we are just, by writing long, we are just telling the compiler that instead of occupying 2 bytes, occupy 4 bytes, so that the range can be increased. So in this we are able to store only up to 32,767, but over here the range has increased drastically. So again, it depends on the requirement. If suppose if I just want to store the marks of the student, and marks it can be like out of 100 or out of 1000, so in that case this range is enough, right? I do not need this range of long signed. So I will declare it as short signed int. But if suppose if I am storing the, if I want to store the balance sheet or something related to finance, then that may require this range, right? So in that case, I will declare the variable as long signed int. So it is all up to me that what type of data I want to store. According to type of data that I want to store, I will declare the type of the variable, right, as int, float, double, char. Then according to the type, according to the range, I can use the long and short. And then according to the requirement, whether I want to store the positive number or negative number, I can use this signed unsigned modifier, right? So this is all about the data types. So if you have any doubt, you can put it in the comment box, and do subscribe my channel and share this video with your friends and colleagues. So thank you.